Hey everybody, John Magnon here with DevCentral, and we're bringing you another Lightboard lesson video. And today we're going to talk about iRules and how you can manipulate them to do some pretty crazy stuff sometimes. For those that don't know, iRules are our programmability feature in the Big IP, and they're based on an extended and customized version of Tcl 8.4. Tcl is the tool command language, the scripting language. And one thing that's interesting about Tcl is that it implicitly carries out substitution and execution like an evaluation in several of its commands. So in some programming languages, you have to explicitly say, hey, evaluate this certain thing. Tcl will implicitly do that just by virtue of the way it's built. And in most cases, a single round of substitution, so if you have, variable x equals whatever, a single round of substitution is not a problem. But the one issue comes into play when you have more than one round of substitution. So 2 rounds could be a problem. And just so you know as well, there's a lot of F5 specific commands that don't trigger expression evaluation directly. A couple of them are like the persist command or HTTP respond command. So while iRules on the F5 Big IP are based on Tcl, they do not explicitly equal Tcl. So there's a lot of Tcl commands that just won't work in iRules, and then there are some commands in iRules that are unique to F5. They're F5 specific commands. So anyway, the example that I'll show you here goes through what's called the double substitution and how that could be problematic. So syntax becomes a pretty interesting and important part of all of this, and I'll just write out a really quick iRule here. I won't go into the exact syntax, but you'll get the idea. So let's say you have a virtual server and it has an iRule attached to it, and it evaluates an HTTP request. So let's say you have when HTTP request, so it's going to be request, and then you want to set a variable. So we're going to set the variable A to alpha, all right? And then we're going to set B, let's set B to A, all righty? And then we're going to do a couple of log statements. So we're going to say log, log, and log, and I'm going to show you the difference among these 3 different, the way that this whole thing works. So let's, on the first one, let's use what I'm going to call curly braces here. And curly braces indicate static data. It's not going to be parsed as code or reparsed or anything like that. It's just going to be what it is. So if we say A equals $A, and then B equals $$B, and then close curly braces, all right? So let's say that that's our first log statement. The second one, we're going to use quotes and say A equals this same thing, $A, and then B equals the same thing, $B, and then close quotes, right? All right, then the last one here, we use quotes again. We'll say A and B equal, and then I'm going to use a command called substitute, or S-U-B-S-T, all righty? And here I'm going to use square brackets and then say the same kind of idea. A here, and then I'm going to do 2 $, B, and do that, and then close bracket, and then finally the close quote to do that close quote. All right, so essentially what we have here is, again, curly braces and then square brackets with this substitute command, inserted in there. Okay, so again, we've got a HTTP request. The key thing here is we're going to set the variable A to the value alpha, right? And in fact, I'm going to put that in quotes, actually, is what we would need to do here. And then we're going to set the variable B to A, all right? So what happens on this first one, when an HTTP request comes in and this thing fires and it does its thing, the actual output down here on this first one is literally going to be this right here. It's going to say, without the curly braces, it's going to be A equals $A, B equals $B, and that's going to be it. So that's going to be the output of this first log statement. The output of the second log statement is actually going to get evaluated, but it's only going to get evaluated one time. So when you do a $sign and then a variable, essentially, or what that does is it calls that variable, calls the value for what that variable has in it, and it replaces it here. So what is the value of the variable A? Well, we set it up here to alpha. So what this one is going to give us is it's going to say A, it's going to say alpha, all right, or I'm sorry, A equals alpha, and then B equals, and then what it's going to do here is just one time through, it's going to take this $B right here, and it's going to use that to call the value for B, and it's going to replace this $B with whatever the value of B is. So it's going to put that A right in here. So that's going to leave you with B equals $A, right? And so that's what's going to be, output in that log statement. And then finally, the last one, and this is where it gets kind of interesting, is when it says A and B equals substitute A, B, with all these $signs and stuff, whenever the substitute command comes into play here, whatever is inside that substitute command is going to get evaluated first, and then once that command is all said and done and it has the results of whatever it's going to end up doing, then it's going to have its results, and then the I rule is going to evaluate the entire statement after it evaluates this part in here. All right, so when it evaluates this part in here, it's going to take the value for A and it's going to put alpha in there, and then it's going to take the value for B and it's going to put A in there. So now you're left with A and B equal alpha $A, but it's going to evaluate all that again, and so it's going to pull in the actual $A, so it's going to come back and call A again, and it's going to bring back alpha again. So here, it's going to say A and B equal alpha. All right, so alpha. Well, that should not be a period there, just alpha. All right, so that's what it's going to have. The interesting thing about that is that because the substitute command is evaluated first, and the results of that come back before it evaluates this line again, then an attacker could take advantage of that. Let's say you have a big IP up here. So you have your big IP, and it's got a virtual server that has an I rule on it, and so this virtual server is, it's on your big IP. And let's say a client request comes in. So you have a client who sends a request into your virtual server, and the I rule, let's say the I rule is going to evaluate like HTTP header, okay? So it's going to look at the header of the request that comes in, and if the header has certain information in it, then it's going to, take action, and if not, then, whatever. But nonetheless, it's going to evaluate the header information of the client request that comes in. So if that's true, then a client could send in a request where the header information itself has a Tcl command that, say, has this substitute, or a Tcl code, I should say, that has this substitute command in the header itself, and instead of saying, hey, let's just replace B with A or whatever, which is pretty innocent stuff, let's say that the substitute command in this case includes some malicious code, right? Well, what's going to happen is if all that stuff is true, then as the client request comes in, the big IP I rule is going to evaluate the header, but because of the nature of the way that Tcl works with doing the substitute command first, it is going to see that the header information from the client request has a substitute command in it, and it's going to evaluate that and execute on that first so that it can get the results of that, so that then it can evaluate the entire line of code, in this case the header information. But if the substitute command itself has malicious code in it, then this potentially would run that code if it's not written properly, And then by the time it actually evaluates the header information, it's too late because the malicious code's already been run, right? So that's one of the issues that could come into play here with the double substitution in an I rule. So one of the things that F5 has done to help kind of control this, if you will, is they've included, or we've included, detection for some of the common cases where this double substitution may occur. Because, by the way, this substitute command is not the only one that does this double substitution stuff. This, by the way, this is not necessarily it's not actually an F5, specific issue. Anything out there, any company or technology or whatever that runs Tcl is going to run into this. In fact, frankly, larger than that, any kind of code could be used to do stuff like this. It's just this is the exact way it's done in Tcl. You could do it in other languages as well. But like I said, because iRules are based on Tcl and because iRules are used in the big IP, F5's put some controls in place to say, hey, some common cases where this may occur, we already know about them, and as you go to save or load or validate your configuration in an iRule, the big IP is actually going to, throw up a kind of a warning error, if you will, to say, hey, are you sure you want to write this iRule using this specific syntax? And while syntactically it is correct and it will run, from a security perspective, it's probably not the best way to do things. So anyway, so the big IP will actually alert you on some of this stuff if you've written it incorrectly or insecurely, I should say. So what in this case specifically, a best practice is to enclose all of your expressions in these little curly braces here. So I'm just going to put little curly braces. Well, that's not a very good curly brace, but you get the idea. All right, using curly braces, again, does not do the double substitution thing. It's just going to evaluate it as is, and it's it's not going to you're not going to run into this double substitution problem if you use curly braces to enclose all of your expressions. So anyway, so this is the issue that could happen out there. Wanted to make sure you're aware, and this is there's good news and bad news when it comes to programmability. Frankly, in general, the good news is that programmability is a very powerful tool that you can use. In this case, on your big IP or just in your network. The bad news is programmability is a really powerful tool. It's like the superheroes would say, use your power only for good, never for evil, right? And part of that includes knowing exactly how the stuff works, and there are some people that may use it, or may write code in an insecure way and not even understand that. And so the more you can learn, the more you can understand, hey, this is what could happen if you don't write code in a certain way, the better off you are. So educate yourself, make sure you know what you're doing. Another thing that I'll just say really quickly is if you find some code out there on the internet somewhere, before you just copy and paste that stuff and put it into your production environment, you'll want to run through that stuff and make sure that it is written properly, that it doesn't have vulnerabilities in it. Again, make sure you write secure code, use best practices, and you'll avoid things that could potentially happen. So I hope you've learned a couple little things about iRules, double substitution, and how that could be a good thing, but how you could also use it in a negative way as well. So I want to make sure everyone stays out of trouble out there. So thanks for watching this Lightboard lesson video. Hey, if you like this thing, you can click up here on our DC ball and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys out there in the community.